everyone. Welcome back to the We Bought a Franchise podcast. I'm Jack Johnson.
I'm Jill Johnson.
And we have an amazing guest today. This is a gentleman, Scott Greenberg. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's about time you invited me.
Right?
I feel like we have you on every episode because we talk about you so
We do.
So that explains that burning sensation in my ear. So
yes, that's why.
Scott, we're so thrilled to have you because, we're obviously working with potential franchise owners every single day, working with existing franchise owners, including ourselves, every single day. And Scott is an acclaimed author. He's written 2 excellent books that I think everyone who's exploring franchise ownership, everyone who is a franchise owner needs to read. But Scott practices what he preaches. Did you know he's been a top performing franchisee himself? Scott, we'd love to hear maybe let's start with a little bit about who you are and your journey into franchise ownership.
Sure. I'm a speaker and writer, and I help franchisees grow their businesses in a variety of different ways. I began years ago as a straight out motivational speaker, long before getting into franchising. And so it was great. I mean, I was traveling the country, giving these presentations, and my content evolved into different topics. And I was doing a lot of things on leadership, speaking to people who had a lot more experience actually doing it than I did. So I was mostly just sort of like restating a lot of the cliches that you hear. There's no I in team, that kind of stuff, like quoting other speakers. And it was fine, but I always felt like something was empty. And my wife and I were starting a family, and I'm like, okay, I want another stream of income, but I want some more real world experience. And I saw an airline magazine ad for edible arrangements. And I thought, oh, that looks cool. And before I knew it, I was on an airplane and off to a discovery day and signing lots of documents. So I ended up buying. Honestly, I got lucky that I found a brand that worked. I would never advise anybody to just, have an impulse like that and then start signing. I would definitely work with someone like you to well, hang on a second. Let's explore different options and see what's best. So I lucked out into a situation that was really good. So I never left speaking, but I also pursued that business as a way to learn as much as to earn, so I could get some real world on the ground concepts to share with my audiences. So it was tough, but we got better and better. And eventually we kind of climbed in the rankings and became one of the top stores in California. And then we took over a struggling location. And for 10 years, I did that while still speaking. Well, I started getting invitations to speak to franchise systems. So I've met franchisees from all these different brands and all these different sectors. And I got to meet most people and those who are struggling, but I also still get to meet all their top performers. And I've seen what they all have in common. It is unmistakable. And so I ended up writing a book, The Wealthy Franchisee, about those people, what makes them different and what the rest of us can do to replicate that. So I've since sold my stores. I now do full-time speaking and writing and coaching, but helping people grow their business by replicating the same tactics and the same mindset as those in franchising who are just killing it.
Scott, it's like the Bible. We tell
it's everywhere in our house.
Every client, they need to read this. Our journey before becoming franchise consultants was being a part of a company called Home Care Assistance, which was a home healthcare franchise, which now is known as The Key. And it actually started as a family business. And I witnessed firsthand, because I did all the Fran Dev for Home Care Assistance, growing from one location to hundreds. And same sort of thing as you, I would watch, and you'd bring on new classes of franchise owners, and you would think you would know who was going to be the most successful. And then almost every time you'd be wrong. But what I noticed was there was such a mindset difference between the top performers and the low performers. And you would see it, the best place to see it would be at the franchise conference, which I know you do a ton of speaking at different franchise conferences, which is, gosh, how many different franchisors have you worked with at this point?
Oh, I stopped counting a long time ago. So many that when I'm interviewing franchisees from different systems, sometimes in the middle of those phone calls or Zoom meetings, I forget which brand they're from because there's so many. And after a while, the issues start to sound the same. But I've spoken to a lot.
Okay. So I would see at our conference, the top performers, they'd be sitting up at the front, asking questions. They were brand champions. Then we had sort of the lower performers that were sort of clustered in the back that used this opportunity to attack.
Complain attack.
And, bring up the things that were frustrating them. And I remember watching that and saying, if one day I'm a franchisee, I'm going to do what these guys at the front of the room are doing. And if I have, concerns, because look, nobody's perfect. Every franchise system has things that it could improve on. But it was then that I saw, boy, mindset really matters in franchise ownership.
Yeah, I agree. And I will tell you that, I went into it with, an open mind and open eyes, not believing that it's simply a matter of having a positive attitude. Because I meet a lot of people with a positive attitude who are going bankrupt. And some of them don't even realize it. Like I talked to one guy, I said, how's business? He said, great. I said, what's that based on? He says, well, most businesses close in the first year. It's 18 months and we're still here. He had no idea. And he showed me his P&Ls. And this guy's like in trouble. But he was all about positive attitude. It's like mindset is so much more than that. But it's amazing how big it is. And, what's interesting is when we became one of the top locations, other franchisees started visiting us and calling me and asking questions. And what's interesting about hearing their questions is you see what they're focusing on. They never said, hey, what do you do to build great culture? Or what do you do to get through those tough times, like mentally? How do you keep yourself pumped? No, they ask questions like, where do you find good people? Mm-hmm. And how are you driving in more clients? How are you keeping your costs down? Like just focusing on that level. They were never interested in looking in the mirror and seeing what they can do. And I believe that every franchisee is the biggest factor in the business, for better or for worse. And until we ourselves are the greatest asset, we'll never really know how good the business can be.
Yeah, I mean, that's so well said. And it's amazing to me. Jill and I work with a lot of franchisees who are looking to exit and sell their business. And it's amazing to me how many will come to us and they don't even, you'll say, okay, well, let's see your P&L. And well, I better call my accountant. Like just the most basic thing. And like you said, you're right. You better be on top of that revenue and you better be on top of not only where you are today, but where you're going to be a month from now. It's like, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to say that, the typical or struggling franchisee, they see the P&L as a report. The wealthy franchisee sees it as a tool that they monitor and use constantly to look for opportunities and see the problems. So the idea is that you have to call your accountant to get your P&L. You should be able to access it within moments and should be, so you can see how things are going. You can't just look at your bank account or just look at the operation.
Right. Well, we feel like so the whole mission of Franchise Insiders is franchise owners helping future franchise owners, right? So every one of our consultants, ourselves included, are either current or former franchise owners. And we believe that having that experience in running a franchise, growing a franchise, understanding what it's like to do all these things that we're coaching our clients to do is so vital, because and also building a business from day one that you could sell. It's amazing to me how many people, like, your experience, like you said, you were very fortunate. It was in you to be a successful franchisee. But a lot of people who just say, hey, you know what our town needs? Our town needs an ice cream shop. Let's bring it here. You know that one we saw in Atlantic City? You need to be thinking from day one about exit strategy. Even if you might not ever sell that business, build it to sell.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting way of putting it that, if I'm like making sure that this thing has value, that would be appealing to other people. The only way to make that happen is to make a lot of great choices, which will, put more money in your pocket as you're, building up towards that moment. So it really is important to be able to do that. And so, I mean, it's great advice if that's what you're offering people. And they should be thinking about it. First phone call with you, where they want to get into a business, they should be thinking about what they want on the back end. And so I absolutely love that guidance.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at businesses from multiple layers, and I think, again, like you said, so many times people, they immediately, how much is this person making? What's the net profit? How much am I going to make? It's like, slow down. Let's understand that those first few months, probably those first 18 months, are so critical, and you want to make sure that financially you're prepared to do it, and that you understand what those challenges are. I don't know, Scott, where do you see, in terms of franchisees in those first 6 to 18 months? Because I've always found that's the most critical time, probably the most challenging time. What have you seen people do differently during those initial months that really sets them on the right path?
There's a number of things, but if I really had to boil it down, they spend 18 months learning and giving, and they're not thinking so much about taking, right? They're there to promote, they're there to pump up their team, they're there to build up their community, to provide as much outgoing value to everyone around them, to get the word out, to build the loyalty, right? And they're not thinking about how quickly they can start making money from the business. And that's not an easy thing to do, right? Because often people are leaving their regular source of income in order to run the business. So I understand that burden to want to start paying down debt and want to, have a stream of income. But the more you can focus on putting value out there, there starts to be that boomerang effect. That's one thing I've always admired about the two of you. As I've known you and certainly watched you on social media, and I constantly see you giving and sharing advice, and even this podcast. It's all about how can you just put more value out into the world. Well, there's a boomerang effect to that, and so I think that we need to just think ourselves as farmers, and that first year or two is planting season.
Yeah,
right.
That's really, I love that. That's super solid advice. I'll never forget when I joined the Rotary Club for the first time, which was a wild experience for me. It was very different. And I was younger, and I went in with a sales mentality. I went in like, hey, I'm going to make these connections, I'm going to get clients. And I learned very quickly that was the wrong mindset for that. And fortunately, I had someone in that group who sort of saw that and said, listen, if you're going to join something like this, you have to be about giving first. You can't just go around looking to at everyone like they're a lead. Mm-hmm. You have to give to people and give value to people, and the other stuff will come. And I also think that the world has changed a lot. And the days of the slick salesperson, they're gone. Nobody wants to be sold. People, especially now with all these choices we have, we can go onto YouTube, we can find the people that we want to talk to, but no one wants to be sold. They want to learn. They want to have authentic, guidance, and for people to be real with the positives and the negatives.
Yeah, we do that quite often with our clients, to the point where we tell them not to move forward with something, like that true honesty, because we want the best for them. It's not just about the dollar signs, and we want to make sure that they're, picking the right franchise that's right for them. And so we'll have that authentic conversation with them, and it may kill us on the back end, but that's just not in our nature, because we want everyone to succeed. For us, their success is our success. So, it's important to be that. Anyone can make a sale. Anyone can, make it something look really, really good. And
selling a business is it's never worth it. Someone has to be ready for that.
Yeah, it's tough. And Jill, I know you said that it hurts you on the back end, but I've got to take issue. I don't believe that, especially with you guys and your line of work, with what you do and with what I do. Every transaction is a marketing opportunity. Yeah. Right. That if done well is going to lead a lot more. So you help someone determine that it's not the right thing for them. The word of mouth, the trust that's there has got to be worth so much more than what you might make if they do move in that one transaction.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
100%.
The trust and integrity that you're demonstrating there. And so, a couple of years ago, I backed out of a full fee speaking engagement with a pretty major brand because what they wanted me to speak on, I just couldn't get behind. I had interviewed the franchisees, and I'm like, if I get up and give this message, I'm going to have things thrown at me. It just was not in line with what they wanted. And I said, you know what? I think we could maybe focus on this other message. And they're like, no, this is what we want you to speak on. And I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not the guy for you. And it was tough to do that. And they were angry about it, but I could sleep well at night because I didn't want to take their money to say things that I didn't mean. I knew that I wouldn't be of much help. So it's hard to say no, but I think in the long run, you want to have the right kinds of transactions. So I support your approach 100%.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. What's so interesting is how many people we still get to this day who call us and say, listen, I want to own a business, but I want someone else to run it for me. Do you have any of those absentee franchises? And it feels like in COVID, that really became a thing, right? With good reason. People were starting to diversify, and they started to look at franchises like the stock market or like real estate. And like you, our experience has been that the most successful franchisees that we've placed, the success, yes, having a great franchise is really important. But as I looked at our client Hector, who comes to mind, he owns a senior helpers franchise. And the average, just to make sure we're FTC compliant here, the average in their item 19 shows franchisees gross $1.6 million after they've been a franchisee for 60 months or more. Hector did $3 million in his third year. So why does Hector do twice what the average post 60 months does? And the answer is that Hector is relentless. Even in his diligent process with us, he was so focused, he was so detail oriented, he got the deal he wanted, he got the extra zip codes. Maybe you can speak to that, what you've seen in those high performers. What is it that separates them?
It's interesting. We're talking about a few different things here. One of them is just honesty and integrity with franchise systems. I know at least one franchise system on their website, they say, yes, this is great for people who want to be absentee owners.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to their convention, I spoke to the owners, and they're like, right? And so you have to be careful when a franchisor, says that. This can't just be an investment, right? A franchise is a living thing that needs love and energy and cultivation, and we don't want to be deadbeat owners. But that doesn't mean that we need to work it full time. And again, for me, I never gave up professional speaking. And the real name for professional speaking is traveling, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me to go to a franchise conference and speak for an hour, it might be 2 days that I'm gone for that. And I never wanted to leave that. So I had to build my franchises in a way where I knew that I didn't have to be there always, but I was engaged constantly, multiple phone calls and text messages, all day long. I'm looking at the security cameras to make sure someone showed up and turned on the light, that they're prepping the fruit, to make sure they, closed at night. They would send me reports. And then when I'm not on the road, then I, was definitely in the stores having a presence. But I was able to open up a second store, able to continue to travel. I was able to scale, right, by working intelligently. There's the whole thing of working in the business versus working on the business.
Right.
And so, if Hector's running, a senior in-home care thing, he can do that and he can scale it, but not if he's the one who's going into someone's home and is looking after an elder. He can't be doing that, but he has to do things that allow him to scale. And so I don't know that, again, you physically have to be the one operating a business, but you got to be engaged and give the business the love and attention it deserves. But again, I'm doing a session at the QSR Evolution Conference. I'm doing a whole presentation on the wealthy franchisee. Then I'm bringing up a panel of franchisees and interviewing them. Some of these people have a couple hundred units, but they only have 24 hours in the day, just like someone who's operating a single unit. So it's about a smart use of your time and knowing what kind of energy and how to manage your time.
That's a great point. And we placed people in the same franchise that have opted to fill shifts for caregivers, and their revenue is a quarter of what Hector's is. And we've always said, especially in that type of business, work on it, not in it. Yeah. The minute you're out there doing that, you're not doing what you should as an owner.
Yeah. Let me share with you a really sloppy formula that I think is good enough to share with people. I ask franchisees, how much money do you think you deserve to take home every year? Like, how much money do you want to make? And they give me, a number. Usually it's probably less than it should be. Sometimes it's way more than it should be, but they give me a number. And then I say, okay, divide that by 2,000. You work 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. That's 2,000 hours. So take the money you want to make, divide it by 2,000. That's what you think you're worth per hour. Mm-hmm. Then ask yourself, would you pay someone that much to be sweeping up, to be in that home, to be answering phones? And usually the answer is no. Well, if you're doing it yourself, you are, because that's an hour you're not spending doing the bigger things, such as the marketing and the community involvement and the coaching employees, so they can do those things. And so I think we need to, if we think that we want to take home a certain amount of money, if we're worth it, then we need to do the kind of work that aligns with that and train others, and not think, well, I'm saving money on labor. It's costing you something more valuable, which is your time.
Yeah.
It's awesome. That alone worth the price of admission. That's fabulous. Thank you, Scott. That's so much of this, again, is working smartly. I have a question for you. Here's a big thing that comes up. Validation in terms of franchisees that we're validating with. For years I've said, talk to the high performers that have joined in the last few years so you get a sense of how the system is growing right now and get a sense of what they've been doing. I myself personally have always thought, and I think Jill and I are aligned on this, that there wasn't much we could learn from the low performers. But I don't know, I'm kind of coming around to maybe some diligence there is worthwhile. What are your thoughts on that?
I like collecting as much data and perspectives as possible. So if I'm talking to a prospective franchisee who's interested, and I really encourage them to do the validation calls, I encourage them to ask questions that bring out facts and data as opposed to opinions. Like, do you like the business? Well, you don't know their value system. You don't know their temperament, right? What they want, that, as opposed to asking questions like, describe the culture, or how much money did it actually cost you to open the business?
Yeah.
What do you do to market? Now, when you're talking to top people, that's great information. Sometimes when you're talking to struggling people, it's a cautionary tale, right? And so I think there's use in hearing all those perspectives, but it's like reading online reviews. It's like, well, hang on a second. Let's really look at what is the review, who's saying it, that kind of thing. You're probably going to get more truthful things, more useful things from those top performers, because they're showing, that they're determining what's possible. I will say this, though. What I learned when I wrote The Wealthy Franchisee and I interviewed all these great franchisees is very often they themselves don't know why they're successful. The most common answer I got, hey, why are you so great? They said, well, I just have a great team, or I got lucky, or I don't know. To me, it was obvious talking to them. They have that kind of mindset, but they wouldn't always be able to reflect on that. And if you ask the struggling people why these people are succeeding, they're going to say, well, they've got the best location, or they work the hardest, or they're just the favorite of the franchisor, So we have to be discerning. But I think there's something useful, even if it's knowing what not to do, who not to be like.
Yeah.
We can get that as well. But I will say this, that, and franchisors will not be thrilled with me encouraging this, but when I was doing validation for edible arrangements, yes, I called the people they told me to call. But that's like checking someone's references. They're not going to, you ask for someone's references, they're not going to, give you the people who are, angry. So
Right.
because I travel a lot, I would always try to go by the local edible arrangement store and see if I could get someone to give me some perspective. So you want to hear from a lot of people, but don't necessarily believe just one franchise. Kind of take it all in and try to get to the facts as opposed to just their subjective opinions.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I mean, I think even just looking at Pink's, they're the top performer right now. He is fabulous when it comes to networking, and he has a different approach than we've had, which was ours was more, hey, we're going to spend more on marketing. His was more, I'm going to spend less on marketing, but I'm going to get out in the community and I'm going to network. And for a long time, both businesses were doing about the same thing, but we were doing it in different ways. And the reason why I bring this up is if you talk to us versus talking to him, you're going to get two different approaches to running the same franchise. And the cool thing is that the franchisor supported both and said, look, you need to be doing both, but if you want to put more into one and more into less, it's fine as long as the net result's the same. Which brings to mind another thing that just came yesterday. We have a client who owns a franchise, and he acquired it in 2023, 2 units, and just last week he sold it for $5 million. We spoke to another owner of this very same franchise, different market, who claims it's the worst franchise on earth. Came in same time and says, no support, terrible franchise, is going to close the doors. Isn't it incredible how two people, same franchise, can have such wildly different experiences?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, if it's the worst franchise ever, and for 2 units you can sell for $5 million, imagine if it was a decent franchise, what he could have sold it for. Yeah, and you hear that in every system, right? There's some people who franchisor, they're just in their cubicles. All they care about is their royalty on the gross sales. They don't care about me. On my location, my territory is different, and they don't get, you hear that stuff. But then the top franchisees, they demonstrate, what's possible. There's so much human nature that is reflected in franchise performance. And I guess as someone who just used to do straight out motivational speaking, maybe that's what attracted me to franchising is it's a great space to see all that kind of psychological stuff at play and how it correlates with performance. So, I think if you're at a decent system and they have that top tier group of people in different markets, people succeeding with the business in different markets, they've proven there's an opportunity. So now what it takes is a franchisee who's willing to make not just the financial investment, but that kind of mindset investment. And again, until they do that, they'll never know what it's worth. And so I meet those struggling, complaining franchisees all the time. And I'm just thinking, you're leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're holding your business back by your belief system, by the assumptions that you make.
Well, and it's easy to get caught in that cycle, especially if you're talking to other franchisees who are in the same spot and you just feed off each other. It's hard to get out of that, but that's always why we encourage talking to the top performers. But looking at people's strengths, like in the Pink's example, marketing is more of our strength, whereas that particular owner, he was great at networking. So finding what you're good at and really using that, and it's going to be different for everybody. And it's not to say that one's better than the other.
Right.
But that's why working with consultants like you is great, because you can take people through that process to figure out what are their interests and what are their strengths, so you can line them up with an appropriate opportunity.
Well, and what's interesting is that franchise reference I gave you where a client just had the really successful exit. There's going to be certain markets where that business is going to perform better. And I would actually argue that the client who we spoke to, who we didn't place in that franchise, who was unhappy with it, was in a market that was not well suited for that franchise. And that is true. Like, when I was in home healthcare, it was, hey, in any market, you've got an aging. There's certain, like, you can't go into Louisiana because there's a proof of need that, you'll never get. But in most every other state, home healthcare is really needed. But there are other types of franchises that, frankly, are going to do well in some markets and not do as well in others. And that's where, to your point, Scott, I think working with a consultant, whether that be us or any of the other hundreds of great consultants out there who know about this stuff, can help guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, but mostly you guys.
Of course, franchise owners helping future franchise owners.
That's go. Right. That's right.
You had to choose.
I'm just saying, all things being equal, should be you guys.
Let's go. So, Scott, where can people go to learn more about you, and also if they want to buy your books, what can they do?
My website is scottgreenberg.com, so everything is there. My books are available wherever books are sold, Amazon, everywhere else. And I'm on social media, certainly on LinkedIn is where I'm most active.
Awesome. And we're doing a special promo for any of you that would like to get a free copy of Scott's book from us. Get a free franchise consultation. You can go to thefranchiseinsiders.com, fill out a contact form, schedule a consultation. And once you've had your free consultation, we'll send you a copy of either one of Scott's books, Stop the Shift Now or The Wealthy Franchisee. Both are must reads if you're thinking about becoming a franchise owner. Scott knows his stuff. He's super well regarded. We're very fortunate to get this interview with him today. So, Scott, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Scott.
For this episode, I'm Jack.
I'm Jill.
We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for joining us on the We Bought a Franchise podcast.